everybody, it's Cam Ryman. We are here today with Spock Sanctuary in the never before seen break room because we are still in renovations while we're filming. By the time the video is out and you guys are seeing it, renovations will be done, so be sure to stop by and come check out the zoo and everything that we've got going on here. But today, we are going to be talking about brumation and what that means. You might have heard of hibernation, which is something that mammals go through in a lot of times the winter. And what you might not know is that reptiles also have their different variation called brumation. So brumation is kind of like the reptile variation of hibernation. And the way that it works is that when things start to get a little bit colder, a lot of times that correlates with a drop in the barometer, the pressure in the air. And reptiles have a way to sense that. Still not entirely sure myself what that mechanism is that they use, but they can tell when the pressure in the air starts to drop. And for species that are located a little bit more towards the poles, so we see a lot of Australian species, some of the South American, like more South American species, and even some of the more northern North American species and northern Eurasian species. They can tell that drop in the air pressure, and that tells them that, hey, things are going to get cold soon. It's time for me to just sleep through the winter. And it's not exactly a sleep through the winter. What they do is they'll drop their metabolism way down low. And then occasionally they'll have an activity spike, or something called arousing, where they'll wake up and allow their metabolism to just return back up to its normal level. And then they can go back down and drop that metabolism back down again. And by doing that, their metabolism will do little spikes instead of staying at its high level, and that keeps them using way less energy when food is more scarce. Now, funny enough, hibernators also do this. So depending on who you ask, bears don't actually hibernate because bears truly do sleep through the winter, and their metabolism stays kind of at a high. Part of why we would see bears waking up and having less extra weight on them, because they're actually using all of that energy that they had saved up before they went down to sleep. Whereas true hibernators, so some rodent species, some bat species, you'll see that they don't lose nearly as much relative weight because they are waking up occasionally, but for the most part their metabolism is way lower. They're not burning up all of that. Another aspect of a winter nap, I guess, is something that amphibians can do in some of those more polar species, is something called an estivation. And in our giant African bullfrog, Tumbo, for example, he can estivate because in South Africa they get more of a monsoon kind of weather cycle. And so in the dry season, because it can be harder to access the water that amphibians need to thrive, they can shed a couple extra layers of skin and mucus and create kind of a cocoon. And then they'll sleep inside of that cocoon until the wet season comes back. And in receiving the rain again, it'll wash away all of those extra layers of skin and mucus that they had shed off. And that tells them that, hey, there's water here, I'm good to go. I can wake up and go back to being active and finding food and doing everything that comes with being alive in the wet season. With brumating, estivating, and hibernating, something that happens with that decreased metabolism is digestion stops. So if you have a species that brumates or estivates or even hibernates, you don't want to have them fed too heavily before they go down. Hibernators can have a little bit of food because when they do their arousal spike, they'll digest some more and they'll be okay. What you want to be sure to do when your reptile goes down for brumation is make sure to taper off their feeding, because if they start brumating and they still have a bunch of food in their belly, their gut stops flowing and that food can actually rot in their GI tract. And if it rots there, then they can actually die from the necrosis. So you have to be sure that your reptile isn't too heavily fed in order to have a healthy lizard at the end of the winter. We personally at Spock Sanctuary, we leave Octavia in her enclosure. So when she starts going down for brumation, what we will do is taper off that feeding to make sure that her gut is healthy. And then we will turn off her ceramic heat emitter and leave on her basking light, so that way if she does go through an arousal spike, she can come back out and bask for a little bit, just get herself feeling all good before she goes back down to sleep again. By turning off that CHE, it allows her temperatures in her enclosure to drop a little bit more, but she can still go through all of the necessary cycles and bask when she needs to. Of the species that we do have that brumate other than Octavia, we haven't had a whole lot of brumators. This winter was the first time that Suki, our blue-tongued skink, slowed down a little bit. He didn't go down to a full brumation, but he did definitely decrease his meal size. We have had a Euromastix that brumated at one point. Her name was Kylo. And we had 2 Euros at that time. It was Kylo and Dub Dub, and Dub Dub did not brumate at all. He stayed at full activity level. Kylo went down. She slept through the winter. When she woke back up, Dub Dub had grown substantially more than she had, even though they were about the same size when Kylo went down for brumating. And she did not ever catch back up in size. So that was just a difference in how they spent their winters. In captivity, it is going to be some of a personal preference as to whether your animal is going to be a brumator or not. Tumbo estivated with us once and has never even attempted to estivate again. Instead, he grows just a little bit more, puts on a little bit extra weight each winter, and continues on as things normally are. I hope you guys learned something today, and if you do have a brumator, estivator, or hibernator at home, hopefully you're seeing healthy habits in them, and now you're able to provide what they need just a little bit better. Hopefully you guys get a chance to come in and stop and see the zoo at Spock Sanctuary and everything we've got going on. Thanks for coming and learning with us today.